Hello and welcome to another episode of Reason at Large. I'm Craig Biddle. Today I want to answer a question from Robert who asks, why do you and other objectivists advocate selfishness when that word disturbs so many people? Why not just use the word self-interest or rational self-interest? Well, to begin, it's important to realize that selfishness and self-interest or rational self-interest are all the same thing. Each denotes the same policy, the policy of holding your own life and happiness as your ultimate end and your highest value, and upholding the policy of always pursuing your values with respect to their relative importance to your life, and never committing a sacrifice, never giving up greater value for the sake of a lesser value. So they all mean the same thing, but it is true that the word selfishness seems to, it antagonizes some people, and it definitely is a less popular word in many respects. But there are times that you want to emphasize the radical nature of the objectivist ethics or of egoism. And the word selfishness helps us in those areas. So I personally do not always use the word selfishness to refer to the objectivist ethics. I frequently will say self-interest. Sometimes I'll say rational self-interest. Sometimes I'll modify it even further and say rational self-interest, by which I mean, rationally pursuing the values that are good for your life and respecting the rights of others to do the same, not stabbing people in the back to get what you want, and so on. I mean, depending on your audience and your purpose, you need to add or subtract from what material you're going to present and how you're going to present it. But there are definitely times that you want to really emphasize the nature, the radical nature of the objectivist ethics, and the fact that when we are talking about self-interest, we are not beating around the bush here. We mean really self-interest. We really mean self-interest. We mean a policy of consistent, unequivocal self-interest. And the word selfishness really helps to capture that. Now, it's interesting to think about the relationship of these two words this way. Because so many people are upset by the word selfishness, suppose we invented a new word to mean exactly what we mean by selfishness, but it would sound much nicer and softer and would be less objectionable to many people. So we'll come up with the word waffism or waffishness, we'll say. So waffishness stands, it's short for warm and fuzzy-ishness. And so this isn't going to upset anyone. It's just warm and fuzzy. It's a new term, but we'll mean by it the same thing we mean by selfishness, a policy of always upholding your own life and happiness as your highest value, consistently pursuing your values, never committing a sacrifice, and so on. So if you were to use that word and you go to people and they say, well, what's your view of the moral way to act? And you say, well, I'm a waffist, so I'm for waffishness. And they would say, well, what does that mean? You say, well, a waffist is someone who holds his own life and his own happiness as his ultimate value and upholds that in every area of his life. So his basic policy in life is to pursue his own values, and that means to pursue the values that are good for his life and not to pursue any values that are bad for his life. He never sacrifices a value, so he might spend his money on his loved ones and on people he cares about, but he never gives money away to strangers that he doesn't care about at all, or anything like that. He's just 100% concerned with his own life, his own values, his own happiness. He never sacrifices for other people whatsoever in any situation. So for instance, he chose a job that he loves. He wanted to be a doctor, so he chose that field. He's set up a practice that has been very successful. He makes a lot of money. He sends his kids to great private schools. Takes wonderful vacations, plays golf on the weekends, owns a yacht and 3 summer homes, and he never gives money to anyone he doesn't care about. He gives some money to St. Jude's and some other charities that are really important to him personally, but he never gives any money to anyone that he doesn't care about personally, and that does not add to his life and his happiness. And you go on and on, you're explaining what this person does, and the people you're talking to will eventually get to the point and they'll just say, well, you're just talking about somebody who's selfish. And that's exactly true. You're just talking about someone who's selfish. And people know that that's what selfishness means on one hand, or at least in a certain respect. People know that. So they would identify that fact, and the gig would be up. You would just have to say, yeah, well, you know, a waffist is a selfish person. That's what a waffist is. So you can see by this little thought experiment that changing the word does not change the meaning of the thing in question. It doesn't change the concept. The concept here is the idea that denotes, that subsumes certain instances in reality that constitute what this thing is we're talking about. And selfishness or self-interest or rational selfishness or waffism, whatever you want to call it, is one thing. And that one thing people either like the idea of or they dislike the idea of. Now, there are different reasons that people might oppose selfishness. A lot of people oppose it because they've accepted the package deals that thwart people's ability to think clearly about this. So they've accepted the idea that self-interest equals predation, or that altruism equals benevolence. And if you accept these ideas, these kinds of ideas, you're going to think that selfishness is a bad thing. And you're going to equate people like Michael Dell and Jeff Bezos and people who rationally pursue their own values and respect other people's rights and just try to live their lives beautifully. You're going to equate them with people like Bernie Madoff and mafia types. But they don't belong in the same category. They're not the same kind of people. So we need to bust up these package deals so that people aren't fooled by them. But we also need to be firm about what we mean. And sometimes the word selfishness is very important in helping to emphasize that by selfishness, by self-interest that is, we really do mean a policy of utter self-interest. Principled, across the board, non-sacrificial, unequivocal self-interest, and that's what selfishness means. So I'm not going to say that you should only and always use the word selfishness, but you definitely should not throw the word out. There is a use for that word, and it's helpful when you want to emphasize the radical and serious and absolute nature of what we're talking about. When we as objectivists speak about selfishness. So I hope that helps. That's it for today's episode of Reason at Large. If you would like to send me a question for a future episode, you can email it to me at cbiddle@theobjectivestandard.com. For additional commentary from an objectivist perspective, visit our website, theobjectivestandard.com, where you'll find TOS blog, our daily commentary, and our quarterly journal, The Objective Standard, which is a subscription-only journal, so it's behind a paywall, but the subscriptions are very inexpensive, starts at just $29 a year, and that gives you not only access to the current issue and the next 4 issues, but also 9 years worth of back issue content, so very good value there. Until next time, pursue your values, reject contradictions, and love your life.